All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to JDRF's judgment-free zone for teens living with type 1 diabetes. I'm Melanie. I am a psychologist and I work at JDRF as well. And we have Sim, over to you.
Hi, I'm diabetes social worker from Canberra Health Services.
And we have,
Hi, I'm Fee, and I'm an adult and paediatric diabetes educator, and I've lived with type 1 for 32 years this October.
Woohoo. So thank you everybody for submitting your questions. We're looking forward to discussing these with you and giving you the answers if we can. If we don't cover anything you'd like to know, then feel free to comment below and then JDRF will get back to you down the track. So here we go. First question, why did I get it and no one else at school has it?
Okay, I'm going to start with that one. Do you know what, guys? It's just bloody bad luck. Okay, it's nothing you did, it's nothing that you could have done to prevent it, it's just bad luck. Unfortunately, at some schools, there might be nobody with diabetes, but at other schools, there might be 4 or 5 or 6 or maybe even 8. But that doesn't mean it's any more or less important to how you may be feeling.
I'm absolutely going to add to that. Yeah, no, I'll definitely add to that, because seriously, you could be in a school with a dozen kids who have type 1 and you can still feel really alone and you can absolutely feel really isolated. It's such an individual experience, but admittedly it can feel really, really challenging when you can't identify with another person even at the school that you may want to talk to or link in with. So it can be really hard and you can feel very lonely.
Actually, see, when you just said that, I'm a big believer that though I've lived with it for nearly 32 years, my journey is so very different to anybody else's journey. And all journeys are extremely different. We just have something very much in common.
Oh, absolutely. I often say to my kids that sometimes you might find things that you find really challenging and other things that you feel, I've got this, and other kids will be the exact opposite. Diabetes is the commonality, but what they actually feel that they're absolutely kicking goals with can be so different across the board.
Yeah. I mean, by the same token, two kids with diabetes are not necessarily going to have all those connections either, because they're all going to manage things differently. So just because you both have diabetes doesn't mean you have to be best friends because you're at the school as well. So, you know, I think there's that stuff to think about as well when we're chatting about this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you know what? Yep. I was going to say, sometimes we can feel really good to have something to blame. So when we say, why did I get it? Sometimes we just want to pinpoint something. We want to be really cranky at something, someone, or some moment or space in time. And it can be really hard when we can't do that.
Yeah.
And that can be such a challenge to actually accept. Something has happened. I don't have the power to change.
Yeah.
What am I going to do now?
Yeah. So then we focus on the things we can, don't we? That's how we would approach that. Diabetes is one of those things that we just can't do anything about the fact that we got it, but all we can do is about what we're going to do from now on. All right, next question.
Definitely.
I don't feel comfortable talking about my diabetes. How do I tell my friends? Who wants to start?
Shall I start with that one?
Start with that one.
Oh, okay. Look, I think when I hear something like that, it makes me think about how comfortable it is when you're a young person talking about anything, really. It doesn't have to be diabetes. It's a time in life when so many things are happening and changing. Our bodies are changing, our brains are changing, our emotions are all over the place. And sometimes we can actually feel uncomfortable talking about lots of things. Yep. But I guess in saying that, when it comes to diabetes, sometimes we can also feel like lots of people are talking to us or at us, whether it's our team or our family or all the extended family. And sometimes we can feel like everyone gets a piece of me. So I don't necessarily want to talk about it. So that's how we weigh that up, I suppose.
Yep. I mean, I think by the same token, we know that it's beneficial also for kids to be able to talk about it with their friends, and that can actually be a really good source of support and help when you're there. Fee, I don't know if you wanted to add to that one.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you guys said, but I think it's also really important to take a step back and take diabetes out. And it's always good to check on your mates and make sure everybody is okay. Are you okay? And then if you've got friends that have got some challenges, such as they might have diabetes, they might have epilepsy, they might have asthma, that support group, that group that cares about you, it makes it easier to chat about. And I think it's just really important, all of us in the world, especially when we're growing up in the teenage years, to just check on our mates and say, hey, are you okay?
Yeah, and I think we need to give our friends a little bit more credit too. I think sometimes
Yes.
we're worried about the way that they might react, and we're worried that they might not want to be friends with us. They might tease us. That might, all sorts of things might be happening. But I think we actually need to give our friends a bit more credit, because generally they're our friends for a reason, and they care about you. So they're going to want to be able to help. And, if you don't tell them and something goes wrong, then I'd be fairly cranky if I was a friend and didn't know what was going on and give me an option to be able to help. So I think yes, have some control about who you tell, how you tell. I think that's one of the things that we can, that's really important for you to do, and work out a strategy in a way to tell your friends that makes it comfortable for you and for them.
And definitely doing it in your own time, because I think that the whole barrier there could just be feeling like you've stepped out for sometimes up to a couple of weeks from school. Some people it takes them a little while to get back in, and I'll often remind my young people that, you look the same. Your mates are going to rush up to and be like, well, where have you been? You've been in hospital, but, look at you. I've missed your face, but it looks the same. What's going on? Yeah. And we can, and it can be very anxiety driving, thinking, how do I answer this? Because I may not have the answers. But the reality is they just want to make sure that you're okay. They don't want to know all about diabetes and the ins and outs. They just actually want to make sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's good to have a conversation. If you're like footy mad, like in Victoria, is to say, like Sam Reid, he's got type 1 diabetes. Because one of the things your friends might feel is, well, can you still climb Mount Everest like you've been planning to since you were 6 years of age? And of course you can.
Yeah.
So being able to put it out to them, or if a friend wants to be a supermodel, well, you can still be a supermodel with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
And Bambi, she's showing us that over in the US. So I think that's important too.
Absolutely.
Definitely. All right. Our next question. Do you have any tips on managing alcohol and blood sugars? And this person said, I always go low. So some MDI tips, if possible, we've been asked. I'll hand that over to Fee as our educator straight up, I think.
Okay, well, this is so big. And I know that normally when I'm working with my young people with type 1, that is generally a 45-minute conversation, because lots of things can be taken into account. And it is something that can be adapted to you personally. But there's some things that are just out there for everyone in relation to type 1 diabetes and alcohol. So I'm going to throw it to you guys as well. I'll say 2 tips, and you guys might throw in one as well that and let's see what we can get going.
Yeah,
it is absolutely true. Alcohol can actually cause blood sugars to go low, and we know that we're at greater risk of having a severe hypo when we drink alcohol. A way I kind of think of it is the liver normally has its other role with glycogen, etc. But what it actually does with alcohol is it goes, I'm not going to help you out there. I'm going to go and break down the alcohol. And therefore, we're at greater risk of having a hypo. The other big thing with it is that drinking can make the way we think not as clear. And therefore, we might be saying something, a little bit silly, or might be doing something that people might be laughing at. But in actual fact, it could be hiding the symptoms of a hypo, which could be similar to a way. So a couple of really good tips that I love are always carry medical ID.
Yep.
Okay, so that's fantastic. On your wrist, dog chain, on your phone. You can put a little alert as well. And always carry a blood glucose meter, even if you wear CGM, because it can get knocked out and stuff like that as well. So they're 2 of my favourite tips. Have you guys got some tips as well?
I would just go on from that about making sure that our friends are in the loop. So we've talked before about, informing friends, but I think diabetes or not, one of the tips for young people drinking, if they're going to be drinking, because we know this happens, is to make sure that you have a plan, and you make sure that someone is going to be able to look after you. You've got lifts to get home. You've got plans on how you're going to do it. And I think, what we know about diabetes is that everything's possible. Sometimes we just need to plan a bit more to make it all work for us. So same goes with drinking. I think, make sure you eat, I think, is one of the tips I've often heard about drinking and type 1, is make sure you're eating while you're drinking to maintain your levels, things like that. Sim, what else have you got?
my best tip would be come and have a chat to us as well. Like, we're not as naive as we look sometimes. We know everyone's not sitting there waiting until they're 18 to have their first little bit of alcohol, and we know parties are happening, and we know all of these things are going on, and nothing shocks us. I absolutely promise you. Well, I can speak for myself when I say I don't think there's anything I haven't heard these days. I won't get shocked. Yeah. We're absolutely here to help you. So it is really good to start to feel comfortable talking about these things with your team. It doesn't have to be with everyone. You can just pick someone. If there's someone in the team you feel comfy talking to, absolutely reach out and have a bit of a chat. There's even like tiny little publications on this that you can keep in your wallet. There's actual information that you can have on you if you're unsure.
Yeah.
So that'd be my tip.
And Sim, they've talked, this question specifically has said about any MDI tips if possible. We know, everyone manages their diabetes differently. We have pumps, we have CGM, and we have MDI. I mean, we know, and we've also said that it's very individual for you, so it's best to speak to your educator. But is there anything MDI-wise that might be a good tip that's different to being on a pump, or is it just the same kind of strategies across the board when we're talking about drinking and managing your diabetes?
Well, to be honest, I would say some of the more broad sweeping stuff that we've talked about just in general, keeping young people safe when they're out drinking with friends. I think that's a really important message, an overarching message, because you can get to the MDI and the pump, the finite stuff with your team or with your educator. But it's sometimes because, it's a rite of, it's a time in life when lots of parties are happening. We're finishing school, lots of stuff's going on as well. So I think it's really important to make sure that you know what works for you. So you need to talk more individually. I'm less likely to want to be just too broad about it. I think you need to have that confidence to be able to talk about it. And like I said, it only takes one person. Often, as a social worker on my team, often my kids will come and talk to me about heaps of things, and I've got to source the dietitian or the educator or other people to work with, because very rarely are they coming just for that one thing that's in my ballpark.
Yep.
And I think the other thing is to think about is that anybody that's drinking alcohol, we've got to keep everybody safe. So it's not just about having diabetes, being a young person with diabetes and drinking alcohol. We've got to look after our mates as well. And I think that's really important. And it's just like you said, Mel, we always talk about having some food to keep blood sugars up. Well, you know what? Your mates that are drinking too, they need some crackers or some chips or a souvlaki or a burger.
Yep.
Because that's going to help them be able to process the alcohol that's going to the system, not necessarily prevent a low blood sugar, but it can keep them in a more healthy state as well. So that's important. And footy. And we've got to remember, not just footy, netball, all of those things. If we're going to a party after we've been, can I say, a sloth for the day, just lying on the couch watching telly, well, you'll make adjustments at what your team suggests to do. But if you're playing footy or netball, and then you go to a party that night, what your teammates suggest will be very different. So that's really important to be aware of.
Yep.
Sloth versus exercise.
Factors that influence it, don't they? Same with everything in diabetes. There's always a million different things that are going to impact it, and we just have to try and manage them as best as we can, I think. Definitely. All right, next one. How do I minimize lumps?
Can I do this one?
Yes, please.
You know what? There's two parts to it. One part, it's a really easy bit, and that is I can say what you got to do, guys, is move around. So you can use the back of your arms, you can do your tummy, leave a couple of centimetres between your belly button, your upper buttock. But the second part, Sim, is the hard bit, and Mel as well. And that's that psychology of being able to go, I don't want to give an injection in my leg. I haven't done it for 5 years. That's often what's really hard, but it's that site rotation that will prevent the lumps. But we need some tips on how we can actually psych ourselves up to do it, girls. So what have you got?
You want to start, Mel?
I guess we just talk about really trying start the way you want to finish would be one of my tips when it comes to rotating injection sites. So I have a son who was diagnosed when he was 2, he's now 15. And, we often used to, belly bum, you sort of used to work around, and this was the way it was, and that's all there was to it, regardless of whether he wanted it in his tummy or he didn't. That was the kind of thing. I know teens are older, and we're going to be making our own decisions about where things need to be. But I often think the last thing you want to have is some boobs on your belly where they're not supposed to be. So my tip is to, make sure we move them around as much as we can. And, you know, if it's going to hurt, then there's other strategies you can, if you think it might hurt more in a new place, then there's things that you can try to numb it a little bit or make it feel a little bit more comfortable for that moment until you get used to it. I think there are options for all of those things to make it easier.
Because I guess at the end of the day, what we're just talking about is fear and worry. Just feeling worried that it's going to hurt, feeling fearful that I haven't done this for a really long time. You know, do I even remember how to do it properly? And all of those. So that apprehension is really, really normal. And anytime we're going to do something that in our mind feels like we're doing it for the first time, naturally there's going to be an elevation of anxiety. So it's okay to feel scared. But feeling scared about something doesn't mean that we're not going to do it. So it's really important to be able to kind of draw focus to that. Like, that's okay. But next time, when your brain's telling you this hurts, this is scary, remind yourself, hang on a second, I did it the other day and I actually know that it's not as bad as I think it is. We need to look for those exceptions. We need to get back to that moment where we're like, yes, I didn't want to. I was really worried. I did it and felt slightly like a tool because it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and have a bit of a laugh about it. I have lots of young people who do that and they'll say to me, I actually thought it was going to be awful and it wasn't, and I was a bit embarrassed because I kind of was squealing a bit and, you know, and mum was getting upset with me, and we sort of say, you know, just give it a go. Don't expect to not feel nervous. Don't expect to not feel scared. Yeah. Because that's unrealistic.
Yep. Yep. And again, it's like lots of things in life with that fear makes us challenge the way we're going to do things. And I think, you know, diabetes always fits into those sorts of things. We think it's really different, but it's actually the same for the majority of us trying new things and trying to make change. All right, next question we've got is how does having type 1 diabetes affect weight management? Am I likely to struggle with keeping excess weight off because of my diabetes? It's a bit of a tricky one. None of us are dietitians, so we don't really want to go too much into the whole diet sort of section. I guess one of the things I often think when I talk to families and kids is about the fact that a diet for someone with diabetes is a diet that we should all follow. We just want to be as healthy as we possibly can. So if we look at trying to think about it as a healthy diet and what we should all follow, then I think that's sometimes the way to manage it in that sense. Fee, what do you, educator-wise, where do you sit?
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I think the other thing is what Sim said before, and that is come and chat to us. There's nothing that we can't chat about, and everyone's journey with type 1 is very different, and the way we perceive food would be very different as well. But I think it's important. I always say to people, there's no such thing as a diabetic diet. It's about everybody should eat the same. It's healthy diet. It's just that person next door might eat 3 packs of Tim Tams when they should have probably only have 1. That doesn't mean they should. That just means that the choice they've made is a little bit different. Where for us, if we ate 3 packs of Tim Tams, our blood sugars would rise.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I guess it's also really important to remember that as we get older, our awareness changes, our awareness of our body, the things that we're noticing changing within ourselves. And, you know, depending on the sort of person that we are, sometimes feeling that sense of self-consciousness or you know, it's normal as well, but it's important to be able to talk about it because, you know, you might have friends in your, you know, your circle who are really out there and don't seem to feel self-conscious about anything. And then you might actually feel that you are self-conscious about a few things. Maybe diabetes for you might feel like it's a little bit harder on you physically. And you might think, oh, but I don't like this or I don't like that. But what we really need to think about is how normal this is across the board with or without diabetes. Talking about our bodies, talking about weight, talking about what makes us comfortable, uncomfortable, the clothes that we wear. This is really, really normal. Yeah. And we expect this. So we're not surprised. And it's not so much about what you see and what you notice, it's what you feel. Yeah. If you're feeling really upset about it, or if you're feeling that other people are picking on you, it's really unfair, some of the comments that you're getting, then we actually can talk about it from a different platform. And that platform is talking about the feelings, okay? So what the emotions that we're having around what people are saying or what we're saying to ourselves, we come in at that level. So I see that, I guess, as a little bit different from just that nutritional side where we're talking about our relationship with food. For me, it's very much about how we feel about the food that we're eating, and it's that relationship that we have. Yep. That's where I would come from.
All right, we'll go to our next question, which is, will having type 1 diabetes give me a bit of erectile dysfunction? Fee, educator question.
I was about to go Fiona.
Do you know what? Can I just say, whoever or all of you who sent in that one, I think it's such a good question, because I guarantee that for every one of you that asked that question, there's another 100 of you out there. Yeah. Look, the truth is that, yes, it can. But how does that work? Well, it's actually what they call a complication of diabetes. And we know if you've had high blood glucose levels for a long period of time, and that doesn't necessarily mean, 1 or 2 years, like a long period of time, that different vessels in the body can be affected, and that can actually cause erectile dysfunction. Really important to say though, there is things that can be done to help in this. So just because you might, when you're 58 or 65, you can't get it up, there's actually different things that can help you. And that's really important to know. But there's a lot of fear associated with it. And what I would say to you is what we want to do is manage your diabetes optimally. So, aim for the time in range that your team is saying, and all of those things are going to help prevent some of these complications happening.
Yeah.
Can I also say to that if in your lifetime you do get a complication of diabetes, that doesn't mean you've done things wrong. And that's really important to know as well. And I think sometimes there's out there, people think, oh my God, it's all because I've done something wrong, and not necessarily.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I was going to say 100% agree with you. I think it's a great question, but the one thing to remember is we absolutely don't want to live in fear. No. Because no, absolutely not. So when we get really, really scared of something, we tend to try and, avoid. Now, avoidance isn't going to help us if we're really worried about managing our diabetes. If we think, if I'm not managing it in this particular way, this might happen, this is freaking me out, and then I'm just going to focus on having to do this perfect management, which we know doesn't exist. It absolutely does not exist. Quality of life is so important, and we work so hard to get that message across to balance this out. And of course, it would be absolutely scary as to have that, that conversation or that idea pop into your head, and all of a sudden you're thinking, I don't want that to happen. That is freaking me out now. Absolutely not. But you know what? We talk about looking after ourselves in general so that we can all function in a nice, healthy way. So we're talking about nice, healthy sex life later, later on. Okay, fantastic. This is something that we need to remember can start at any point in terms of looking after our bodies. That's what this is about.
Yep. And Sim and Mel, just because you have type 1, that's not the only reason why you get erectile dysfunction either. There's so many other things out there that can cause, we're not going to go into that now, right, ladies, but it is not just isolated to diabetes. And I think that's really important to remember as well.
Diabetes doesn't mean you're going to have erectile dysfunction. It's not a...
That's exactly right.
And sometimes, can I say, if you've heard it and it scared you, and I don't know what context you might have heard it in, sometimes it can be that where people think that fear will motivate someone to look after themselves. And fear doesn't work. Fear actually can immobilize you completely. And then you kind of turn your back on some probably really solid strategies and advice because you are just scared. Yeah. So that never works.
Sorry, Sim, can I just throw in a tip there that someone told me when I was a teenager, and I love it. If you don't feel you can ask your team and bring it up, but you really want to know about it, such as alcohol, such as drugs, such as erectile dysfunction, your team as you go in.
That's a good idea.
And they just open it and they read it and they can address it with you. And that works really, really well for some people.
All right, we'll get through these next. We've got 2 more questions. We'll get through these. So how can your period affect type 1 diabetes?
Fiona, you're in high demand.
I was going to say, is that a fair question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Most people with type 1 diabetes find that oh, jeepers, there you go. I was going to say bleeding blood sugars. I might take a recount on that. Find their blood sugars go up around 3 to 5 days beforehand, and that's due to the hormones. Yeah. And then what actually happens, a couple of days later, they settle down. You know how we were speaking before that we're all very different? Yeah. Well, that's a lot of people that happens to, that they go up and then they come down. But other people might find the opposite things happen. A really good tip is if you can keep a bit of a track of if you're using CGM or whatever, closet as other, or in your record book when your period is, and you can actually talk to your team and they can actually make a plan for you. So if you find 5 days beforehand you're going like that, they can actually help you out with that. But once again, it's not a recipe that fits for everybody, but majority of people find their blood sugars do rise, and then once the period starts, they settle back down, and it's due to those hormones. Yeah,
so I guess the simple answer is yes. Type 1, like having a period will affect your type 1, your diabetes, but how it affects it is going to be individual to everyone. And then
excellent.
You find a solution with your team for you. Yeah.
Good interpretation.
And it's okay to feel really frustrated about it. Yeah. I'm always coming at it from that perspective, which just sucks. It feels like there's just something else to frustrate me or to aggravate me. And the reality is that for a lot of girls at that time, leading up to their period, can be really full of lots of intense emotions, a lot of irritability anyway, with or without diabetes. And just the fact that you then notice what your sugars are doing on top of that can really lead to that sense of frustration. And again, like I always say, it's okay. Emotions are fantastic. Let's feel them. This is wonderful. It's all right to feel completely frustrated and just ripped off about it, to be honest.
All right. And Sim, do you know the other thing with that is rather than go, oh my God, my blood sugars are high, change the language a little bit. Gee, when it's my period, my blood sugars go above target. Takes blame away.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
I'll say moving on from feelings, we've got our last question. So what do I do when I just can't take having diabetes anymore? I think this is a feeling that majority of people would have a lot of times. I think parents have it for their kids. I think I think it's one of those ones that goes across the board. I guess we'll just go around and give some tips, I guess, is probably the best way. One of my tips often, I think, is to share the load. I think you never ever think that type 1 is a do-it-yourself condition, if you want to call it that. I think it's one of those things that we need to share. And if you're just struggling because it's normal and it's going to happen, then work out what bits you can share. What bits can you hand off to mum and dad? What bits can you hand off to your friend at school? What is it that you can share so that your load is less? I think, that's what we want to do. We want to make it as easy and set ourselves up to succeed as much as we can when it comes to managing our diabetes. That's one tip. Go, Fee. Yeah.
Was that me, Fee?
Over to you. Yep.
Okay. On that one, what I was going to say is that sometimes people find that when they're feeling really overwhelmed that they just go, oh, I might just, forget my diabetes for the day. Unfortunately, you can't do that. Yeah. Okay, so it's still very, very important when we feel like this that we still, check our blood sugar or sense glucose and we give our insulin. But even as important as that is to make sure you speak up to a mum, to a dad, to a friend, reach out to social worker on your team, diabetes educator, doctor, it doesn't matter who it is, but let them know that, hey, this is taking its toll. And I think that's so very important.
Yeah, I have to add to that. Absolutely. I completely agree with both of you. And sometimes when we get to that point where we feel like I can't take this anymore, it's because there might have been a period of time that we haven't talked about it with someone, or other things are happening in our life. And I often say this in relationships, school, friendships, that make diabetes just harder to manage because we're feeling really distressed or worried about another area of our life. And we need to be able to just find that space where we can talk. And sometimes just the act of talking about it can actually really relieve that sense of feeling, I just can't do this anymore. And I absolutely 100% agree, share the load, definitely.
We want to set ourselves up to succeed. Don't try and think, oh, I'll just do better tomorrow. I'll just do it right. I'll be right tomorrow. Everything will be fine, because it won't be, because nothing changes generally in the next day. It's little bits. So you make a plan and work out little bits that you can try. So then you get some success and that feels really good. And that's what we want, is we want to feel good. We don't want to feel like we're not doing a good job. And I think, unfortunately, diabetes sometimes can really make us feel like we're not doing a very good job. So I think we want to pay attention to the successes that we have, whether they're, I checked my sugar today, or I remembered to give my Lantus, or I, bolused 5 minutes before my meal, whatever it is, whatever is your success, then that's a really big thing and you should celebrate it, because managing diabetes is not an easy thing. And it's a big task for everybody, let alone a teenager, to have to do. So,
at risk of sounding like a broken down record, this is really normal. It's absolutely normal and okay to have those periods of feeling completely over it. And no, you don't have to like your diabetes. You can, you know, stamp your feet and say, I hate this. It scares parents sometimes when they hear that, but the reality is it's absolutely okay to do and say that, and you can actually feel pretty good when you do.
Yeah. I always say to people, you can hate it and do a really good job at it. I hate cleaning toilets, but I can clean them well. So, you know, you can actually do a really good job and hate it. So
definitely.
I think we may be out of time. Fee, did you want to add something?
Out of time.
Yeah, I was just going to add that what we can guarantee is that nobody out there is going to wake up one morning and go, oh yeah, I've got diabetes, I'm so lucky. We know that's not going to happen, but we know that, you know, we can thrive with diabetes, and that's really important.
Definitely.
All right. So
thanks for the questions.
That's all the time we've got for today. So thank you for submitting all your questions. A reminder that if we have missed any questions, feel free to comment below on the post and we will get back to you as soon as we can. We'll also put some links up for some support services as well. And that's it. Thanks for everybody for listening and putting their questions in. Bye.
Thank you. See ya.
Thanks, guys.